Nigma dino. So there was a verdict. And as a result of the verdict, there was a verdict that he has to go to exile. Okay? And there was a certain Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict. And what happened after the Kohen Gadol was in office at the verdict, witnesses came forward and they said, V'naseh ben Gerusha or ben Chalusa. We're on Yud Aleph on base, 11b. He became a ben Gerusha, ben Chalusa. What does that mean? The Torah says that a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. The Torah, a Kohen is prohibited to marry a divorcee. Also, not only a Kohen can marry a divorcee, a Kohen can marry a Chalutza. What's a Chalutza? A Chalutza is a lady that Chalitza was done. Her husband had passed away, and her husband's brother had the opportunity to either marry her, do Yibum, or if he refused to do Yibum, then the Chotza now she would remove his shoe. And there was a process called Chalitza. So this woman, if she was a woman who was involved in this process of Chalitza, she is not allowed to marry a Kohen. She's also forbidden to marry a Kohen. Many say it's rabbinic because it's similar to divorce. Because just like divorce, say it again? It's his law. It's his law, but he's not, the brother, meaning the brother has a mitzvah to marry her or to do chalitza, but she's restricted. She cannot marry anybody else. Plus says she can't marry any, she's stuck until this happens. Just like a married woman she's in a certain sense, she's not free to marry anyone unless her husband divorced her. This woman is not free to marry anyone unless the process was done. Either the husband, if the brother married her, if the brother doesn't marry her, he has to do the process of chalitza. Only then is she permitted to marry someone else. Right, free. And she's the one who actually moves his shoe. Right, once the chalitza process was done, then she's free. So it's very similar to a divorce, that this man, she's tied to the brother. Upon the death of her husband, it's called the zikah. She's tied to the brother who of the deceased. She's tied to him, and she needs to, in order to be married to someone else, she has to be released by him. So the fact there's similarities to a divorce, so the rabbis say that woman is forbidden to a Kohen. The same way a divorcee is forbidden to a Kohen. Let me see if someone's trying to get on. Just like a divorcee is forbidden to a Kohen. Now, some might say that it's a biblical prohibition to marry a woman who had chalitza. But for our purposes, a Kohen cannot marry a woman who chalitza was the process of chalitza happened. After then not only that, this guy was a Kohen. He moved up the ranks to become Kohen Gadol. And after he became Kohen Gadol, Mona Yosef, someone killed someone, thank you. Someone killed someone unintentionally. The guy went to exile, and then witnesses come forward and say, you know what, this Kohen Gadol's mother was previously married and was divorced. The mother was divorced, and the mother of the Kohen Gadol was divorced before his father married him. And his father had no right to marry his mother because his mother was a divorcee. And because his father had no right to marry his mother, not only his father no right to marry his mother, the child becomes unfit for kahuna. This Kohen Gadol was now found out to be unfit to be a Kohen. Sure, Kohen Gadol. So now the question, now he's going to lose his position. He has to step down. He's no longer Kohen Gadol because he's not a Kohen in most senses of the word, because he's called a Chalal. He's someone who became unfit, and he became unfit as a result of the action of his father marrying a divorced father of the Kohen, but he married a divorcee, and the product of such a union is called a halal. And similarly, if there would have been a daughter, it would be a halala. The daughter would be forbidden to marry a Kohen. That's a woman that the Kohen can't marry also. So now the question is, what do we do with the guys? Good morning, Mr. Batesh. What do we do with the guy who is in Uri Miklat? We have a rule that if the court made a ruling and there was no Kohen Gadol in position at the time of the court's verdict, the court made a verdict about a guy killed someone unintentionally. We're on 11B, Mr. Patesh. The court said someone killed someone unintentionally. And as a result of the court made a ruling. But at the moment the court made a ruling, there was an empty space regarding Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol had passed away. There was a void. There was a Kohen Gadol had passed away. I have to fill in, and they did not fill it in yet. No. The court, life goes on without the Kohen Gadol. And they need to appoint the Kohen Gadol, but they didn't yet appoint the Kohen Gadol. So now, but the court system was still working, the wheels were turning, and they meted out a verdict. And they said, this guy has to go to exile, who killed someone unintentionally. So what do we say? We say, if there would be a Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict, so upon the death of the Kohen Gadol, the guy leaves exile. But if there's no Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict, he never leaves. He never leaves. He's stuck in exile. What? Right. If the Kohen Gadol dies before he goes in, as long as there's no Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, he remains in exile forever. The fact that they subsequently appointed another Kohen Gadol, it's tough. But like someone said, if Hashem made it that this guy should have a verdict without a Kohen Gadol, that he needs to remain in, that means that's meant to be, that it's not like nothing is haphazard, right? If Hashem made it, this guy, one guy stays in our mikvah for a year, sometimes Kohen Gadol dies a year. So one guy could stay there for 50 years. That it happened in such a situation where it was meant to be, this is how it's meant to be. So now we have a situation. There was a Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict, but subsequently we found out this Kohen Gadol was invalid. So now do we say that retroactively, it's as if there was no Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict? But this guy was, it's like, this guy was unfit for the job because he was not supposed to be Kohen Gadol. He can't even serve as a Kohen. So would we look at it as if there was a void in office, and therefore this guy is like having a verdict without having a Kohen Gadol in office, if he'll be stuck in exile forever? Or do we look at it that the Kohen Gadol being removed from his position is like the death of a Kohen Gadol? And now it's like the Kohen Gadol died, and it's like the Kohen Gadol died, and he could go out. He could be free. That would be free. Rashi gives the case of the Gemara, but we'll explain. Rashi gives the case. Let's say if the guy if there was a verdict, the Kohen Gadol was in office, fake Kohen Gadol, we'll call him, or inappropriate Kohen Gadol. He was in office. We don't want to call him fake because we'll see there might be differences between, because he's really not qualified because there's some disqualification. He was in office. The court made a ruling. They made a verdict, go to exile. And after they said go to exile, he didn't even step into exile yet. The Kohen Gadol died. Because we said earlier that if there's a ruling, if there's a legitimate Kohen Gadol in office and the Kohen Gadol dies, even if the guy never spent a second in exile, the fact that there was a verdict when the Kohen Gadol was in office, that in itself, and then subsequently the Kohen Gadol died, he doesn't have to go to exile. Having the verdict of going to exile will be enough to be a kapara, an atonement. That humility, that being humbled that he was obligated to exile, even if subsequently he did not go to exile. So the Kohen Gadol just died right after the verdict. He's technically, the Gemara said, the Mishnah says he goes free. So now the same question here is, the Kohen Gadol was found to be disqualified. Do we go back retroactively? Because really it shows that he was not really qualified the whole time. And therefore he's not really a Kohen Gadol. He's not really, doesn't have proper status. Or do we look at it just from this moment on? And therefore, if we look at it from this moment on, the guy will be free from now. We look at it retroactively as if there's no Kohen Gadol in the office at the time of the verdict, he'll be stuck in exile. So there's going to be two opinions in the Gemara. The Gemara says, that's the Gemara. Nigmadino, we're on 11b6 to the right side. Nigmadino, there was a verdict. V'naseh Kohen ben Gerusha ben Chalutza. And the Kohen became disqualified because there's information about his parents, about his mother, that his mother was previously married and divorced before his father married her. Pligi bar of Ami v'Rav Yitzchak. There's an argument between Rav Ami and Rav Yitzchak. Meita kuhuna. One says it's like the Kohen died, and therefore he goes free. The guy goes free. It was a verdict. It was a Kohen Gadol in office. And now we look at this Kohen Gadol in office who became disqualified now, like he's dead. He just died now. Right? He's stepping down now. And one says it's nullified, like bittul chametz. It's a nullification. Retroactively, it shows you that he's not a Kohen Gadol, and therefore, when the court had made a ruling that he has to go to exile, there was no real Kohen Gadol in office because he was not fit to be Kohen Gadol. He's disqualified. Just like, I mean, I don't know if it would be a good example. Let's say, like kings come. What would you have said if the guy would have been a Yisrael? If the Kohen Gadol would have been a Yisrael, and found out that he's not a Kohen. It's not a Kohen Gadol. There's no question. You wouldn't say there was a Kohen Gadol in office. There was no Kohen Gadol. It wasn't a Kohen. It's Yisrael. So do we look at a disqualified Kohen in the same fashion? One area, do we look at it in the same fashion or not? So that's the dispute. Yeah, they were irresponsible, but the fact that they were responsible, but we have to deal with the mess. Now we have to deal, how do we move forward? People might have been irresponsible. They didn't check up background, not enough background check. Right. How do we deal with it now? That's the now. Mr. Batesh is interested in making sure it won't happen again. Should have the problem. He's going to the root of things. He's not just dealing with the mess. Okay. So the Gemara says, Lema beplukta Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua Kamuflagi. The Gemara says this argument between the later rabbis seems to be an argument of earlier rabbis. And generally, later rabbis don't argue an argument of early rabbis unless they identify that I'm following the earlier rabbi. If I say a rule, if I'm a late rabbi, I say a law, I don't tell you I'm following a specific rabbi. Sounds like I'm saying a universal, in my opinion, everybody agrees to me. Unless I tell you I'm only going with one opinion. So the Gemara is, so it would seem that these rabbis are going, but they seem to be going, and they're arguing in a dispute that other rabbis. We found another dispute with earlier rabbis, and they seem to have the same argument. And that's what the Gemara wants to know, what they're going to try to figure out. Do these later rabbis, are they specifically, each one is holding by a specific rabbi? Or is it that there's a difference between this case and the other case? And is it possible that these rabbis could also, each rabbi could say, everybody would agree to me? And the fact that you found a different rabbi in a different case might not be comparable, and therefore that might not show that they argue on me in my case. Remember, the case of this argument is, the case was, we found out that Kohen Gadol was disqualified. He was a son of a divorcee, We found that out. And now after there was a verdict, now we want to know, how do we deal with the situation? Do we look at it, Ariel, if a guy was found out to be a disqualified Kohen because he was found out to be a son of divorcee, do we say retroactively it's like there was no Kohen in office at the time of the verdict because he was found out to be a what? Invalid Kohen? Or do we say we only look at it from now on? We look at it like he died. Look at it, it's his death. It's like the death of the Kohen Gadol. He's removed from his office. He leaves office. It's like his death. What? You have two opinions. But one opinion is not like one said, right? Exactly. Two opinions in the Gemara. One in Mars. Right, the murder with the great ramifications for the murder. Exactly. That's where the issue will be. The ramifications for the murder. So the Gemara brings a very interesting, another different machlok, a different story. What was the machlok? Listen to this story. Label of a pulled Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yeshua come in for the It's not. We learned in the Mishnah. We are on 11b, 3 lines from the bottom, and also 11b6. He says, it's on the man was standing and bringing carbonot on the mizbeach. Sounds like a nice Kohen. That's what a Kohen does. The Kohen processes the carbon, right? It says the Yisrael could actually do up to and including the slaughtering of the animal, but the receiving of the blood and everything on, that's where the Kohanim take over. Okay? So we have the Kohen, he's by the Mizbeach, he's doing his thing, he's by the altar bringing the parts of the animal on the altar, and so people come in and say, you know what? The court has just, witnesses came, and they rendered this guy a disqualified Kohen because they found out that his mother was a divorcee. But now what's the status of all the offerings that he brought until now? He processed. Now, what happens if you have a Yisrael that would process an offering? It has to be done by Kohanim. It's invalid. It was an invalid. If a Yisrael would come into the Beit HaMikdash and he would act like the Kohen, he would receive the blood, he would put on the altar. It's avodasa besula. It's invalid, and the carbon wouldn't count. What about the Kohen was already processed? We're dealing with after the fact. We're picking up the pieces. Do we have to process a new carbon? Well, let's say we brought the carbon, the morning carbon. Every morning there was a carbon. That's how we pray every day. The prayer in the morning corresponds to the offering they brought in the Beit HaMikdash. They brought an offering in the morning, we pray in the morning. They brought an offering in the afternoon, pray in the afternoon. They had fats on the Mizbeach at night, burning at night, we pray at night. They brought the carbon, it was just processed, and then they found out that the Kohen who just processed was an invalid Kohen. He was the son of a divorcee. Do they have to redo it? Or he processed, you just brought a carbon Pesach. And you have to redo it because the guy who processed it, the processor, there was something wrong with it's like merchandise and in the clothing industry. Right? They found something to be wrong. You do recalls and you pay back all the customers. It's a whole ordeal. Right? So something was found to be defective in the merchandise. Recalls. So what do we have to go and do it over again? Do we have to do the carbon? Here, Ariel, the question. Morris, you hear the question? Do we got to redo everything that was done by this Kohen? Or do we say no? From now on, he's no good. We can't use him. But whatever he did, whatever happened with him as the predecessor, it goes. That's the question in the Gemara. So the Gemara said, now, logically, what would you say logically? I would think, logically, if you found out that he's invalid, you would think it should be invalid, I would think, because it shows you should redo it because it shows you he wasn't a proper coin. Well, we're going to see the Gemara is going to have a special pasuk that's going to have a chidush that says that that's explaining this opinion that it would work, that it stands. A special pasuk, it gives an allowance for such a circumstance if it happened. Yes. Yes. He has to stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies. But if there was a verb, right. The pasuk said he stays there ad mot haKohen Gadol. The pasuk said, okay. It could be what the reason for that is that this guy killed unintentionally, and he killed unintentionally, and he could have been more careful, as we said. It was something that he could have done better. He needs to go to exile. He needs a kapara. He says, what's the connection with the Kohen Gadol on in general? What's the connection? Why is the Kohen Gadol connected to this whole thing of he has to stay in exile until the Kohen Gadol dies? Where is that connection? So I think part of the connection is, as we said, is the Kohen Gadol needs a kapara for this murder, because the Kohen Gadol could have done something better. He could have prayed. So there's a blame on the Kohen Gadol and there's a blame on this guy. They're both guilty. The guy who committed the murder unintentionally, he could have done better. But there's also someone else that's also connected to this murder. Who else is connected to this murder? The Kohen Gadol. How could he? Because he could have prevented the murder by praying, and he didn't. He didn't do a good enough job. So he needs a kapara. Okay, but if there was no Kohen Gadol in office, yes. They found out that he has in the general situation. We got we're claiming that because those also involved in the murder. But now right, and therefore the guy has to stay forever. Until the next yeah. Meanwhile, therefore we say if there's no Kohen Gadol forever, right, exactly. Even if new Kohen Gadol is subsequently appointed, but at the time of the verdict, there's no Kohen Gadol, right? There's no Kohen Gadol in office. The guy remains in exile forever. So now the question is, we found out one halachic case. Mr. Haber used to always say, case, law, and reason. Now we have a different case. The Gemara is comparing the case. What's the new case? Not that the Kohen Gadol was found to be unfit, and therefore we want to know about exile, ramifications regarding exile. We want to know if the Kohen became unfit, ramifications regarding the korbanot. The korbanot. Do you have to redo the korbanot? You don't have to redo the korbanot. So the Gemara is thinking they seem very similar. Different case, but they should work with the similar ideas. Do we go retroactively? Do we say that retroactively there's like no Kohen process it, therefore it's no good if you redo the korban or not? So the Gemara says, that's the Gemara now. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kol korbanot sheikriv psulim. Rabbi Eliezer says all the korbanot that this man processed are psulim, are invalid, and you got to redo them. Rabbi Yehoshua Machshir, in the little letter of the Rambam, seems to go with that opinion that it's kosher. Rabbi Yehoshua says that it's kosher. All those korbanot are kosher. So the Gemara says, Madi Amameta, the one who said, when by the case of exile, that it's like the Kohen Gadol died when he became removed from office as a result of finding out of his lineage. It's as if the Kohen Gadol died. He's like Rabbi Yeshua. He seems to be going like Rabbi Yeshua that says that he's only invalid from now on, but all the korbanot until now are fine. Uman di Ama Batla, the one that says Batla, that the kahuna is Batla, that it goes retroactively. That goes like the of Rabbi Eliezer. That goes like the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So that says, Rabbi Eliezer said that all the korbanot that were brought until now will be invalid. So the Gemara is suggesting that these rabbis, these late rabbis, are arguing in the same machloket of two other rabbis, right? The same machloket that's found, the same dispute. It's like, you know what, if I tell you, what you say? For the kabbanot, exactly. It's like I tell you, if I say you make a bracha on an apple, Bor Pri, and someone else tells you, they make a bracha on an orange Bor Pri, they're both saying the same, they're both holding that it's something that grows from a tree. Say bracha Bor Pri. They both have the same reasoning. So the Gemara is speaking that it's two different cases. One's an apple, one's an orange, but you're saying the blessing is the same in both cases. So the Gemara is comparing these two different cases of Ori Miklat, exile, offering a korban, Kohen becoming invalid. The Gemara is comparing it and thinking that they're very similar. And the rabbi that said his opinion by this case would say a similar opinion by the other case. That's what the Gemara, that's the lineup, how the Gemara is thinking at this point. And now the Gemara is going to say, is that true or that's not true? And therefore, if that would be true, then you would not be able, the halacha would have to be one way. Either the halacha would be everything is retroactively, you're invalid, and therefore by Ori Miklat, it's like there's no Kohen Gadol in office, and all the korbanos have to be redone, or it's only from now on. It's like the Kohen Gadol died. All the korbanos are good until now, and the guy can leave exile. That's the Gemara's thinking. The Gemara's going to come out with a split. The Gemara's going to split the two, that they're different cases and they're different laws. Even though at this point of the Gemara, they seem they seem very similar. Why would you make a distinction between Ari Miklat and Karban? If you hold it's retroactively no good, so you say it's retroactively no good by Karban. If you hold it just like it's only from now on, it's like the death of the Kohen now, so it should be like the death of the Kohen now on for Karban. So that's what the Gemara is thinking. And the Gemara says now we're on Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 12a on the top. Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that all the korbanot are invalid. That was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So the Gemara says, "Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer, kuli alma lo pligi." Everybody holds kuli alma lo pligi. Now, what does it mean, kuli alma lo pligi? So look at the Rashi. The top Rashi. Good morning, Jake. Jake, we're in the Gemara. We have the case of they found out that the Kohen was ben Grusha ben Chalutza, and the question is, do we say it's only from now on that he's disqualified or retroactively? The Gemara wanted to say that the dispute by Ori Miklat is similar to the dispute by Karban, and they want to match the rabbis to that dispute. And the Gemara says like this. No. The other question is that there is a special law. Kohen, the Torah said that the Kohen, a specific group of people have to bring the korban, independent of anything else. Just Kohen. The death, yeah, but it's true. It's a different case. But the fact that cases are different doesn't mean that the law should be different. The fact that you have different cases, but the reasoning, if you have one reason that applies here, that reason should apply in the other case, unless you have something compelling to make a distinction, why it should be different, this case and the other case. So the Gemara says the following, in the top Rashi, everyone see the top Rashi? On Yud Beis Amud Aleph, Rashi right over here, top right corner. Kloma. Man di ama meta The opinion that says that it's like the Kohen Gadol dies right now, and it's only from now on and not retroactively, Vadai Rabbi Yeshua Amar v'lo Rabbi Eliezer. His opinion is definitely not a universal opinion. His opinion, he agrees with Rabbi Yeshua that says, Rabbi Yeshua is the one who says the korbanot are all good until now. It's the only thing that's not good is from now on. V'lo Rabbi Eliezer. He definitely disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that everything, it goes back retroactively, what it's korban. And all the korbanot have to be undone. If all the korbanot have to be done again, so therefore it's like we would consider the Kohen Gadol as if he was not in office retroactively. Now, and Rashi continues, that Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that says that all of the korbanot are invalid, according to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, that says all the korbanot are invalid, that it goes back retroactively. So there's no such thing of it's only from now on that it's like the Kohen Gadol died. It's not that the Kohen Gadol died now. The Kohen Gadol has been dead all along. It never existed, right? If you're telling me that his avodah, what he served, the bringing the processing of the korbanot, it is invalid retroactively, vaday ein ze kohen. That means you're telling me he's not a kohen. So if you're telling me he's not a kohen, so too that will have the same law regarding the Kohen Gadol, and the Kohen Gadol died, because the Kohen Gadol is found out to be a Ben Gerusha, it means he's not a kohen. If he's not a kohen, therefore the guy will definitely have to remain in exile forever, because there was no kohen in office, because it's retroactively. It's true it's not his fault, but at the end of the day, we need in order for the guy to get out of exile, we need a Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict. And if retroactively there's no Kohen Gadol in the office, he's stuck. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. We got into a very interesting Gemara, everybody. Yes, thank you. Chalutza? Chalutza is warning. If a woman lost her husband passed away, the brother has a mitzvah to either marry her, or if he doesn't want to marry her, she removes his shoe. And symbolic of the fact that he didn't want to build the house. He didn't want to marry her. So that woman, take care. That woman, the fact that she was tied to this brother and then was the only way she gets free to marry someone else is only through this process. He wasn't interested and he has to do this process. It's similar to a divorce in a sense that he can't marry. She can't marry a Kohen.
Same as being divorced.
Similar, exactly. It might be on a rabbinic level, not on a Torah level, but it's a similar thing, exactly.